Let's take a look at job-related employment tests. A test can be successfully defended despite its discriminatory effects if the employer can show that the test is job-related and consistent with business necessity. An employer has legitimate interest in selecting people with the ability to perform jobs well. If more men than women are suited for some jobs or vice versa, discrepant test results might reflect the fact. It is incumbent on employers to have evidence of the validity of a test that is producing discriminatory effects. The validity of a measurement device or test refers to whether it actually measures what it purports to measure. Because employment tests are designed to help employers select people who will perform their jobs well, the validity of an employment test rests on how well it predicts future job performance. There are two primary ways to establish the validity of employment tests. The first is content validation. A test has content validity to the extent that it requires the performance of the same behaviors and skills as the job in question. A classic example of content-valid testing procedure is the use of a word processing or speed or accuracy test to assess candidates for a secretarial job. The test is clearly representative of behaviors and skills that are central to the job. A legal limitation on content validation is that it cannot be used to validate tests of intelligence, personality, or other intangible traits. However, tests of job-specific knowledge or skills can be validated in this manner. Another problem is that tests assume that candidates already possess and can display the desired skills. In reality, many jobs can be learned relatively quickly. Testing procedures that screen out people who would be capable of performing the job following minimal amounts of on-the-job training and practice are not job-related and not consistent with business necessity. Employers should use content-valid tests as much as possible, but not to assess intangible characteristics such as intelligence, and not for tasks that could be readily learned on the job. Employment tests sometimes go through many iterations and years of legal challenges before they meet content validity criteria. The second primary strategy for validating employment tests is criterion validation. Criterion refers to the measure of job performance. The essential component of criterion validation is demonstration of a statistical association between performance on a test and performance on the job. Criterion validation studies can either be predictive or concurrent. In a predictive study, the test is given to applicants and scored, but not used to make hiring decisions. Instead, the employer uses other information at its disposal. 6 months or a year later, when measures of job performance are available, these are compared to test results to determine whether people who scored higher on the test also tended to be better employees. Conducting a predictive study takes time because an adequate number of job candidates must be tested and hired, and a significant period of time must elapse before performance ratings are available. A concurrent study avoids these problems but has a less representative sample. In a concurrent study, the test that an employer wants to adopt is given to existing employees, a handy sample, and one not necessarily representative of job applicants. Performance measures for those employees are available or can be devised for the validation study. Evidence of validity again comes from showing a statistical association between test scores and job performance ratings. A typical measure of association is the correlation coefficient, the evidence needed to establish the validity and hence the job relatedness of a scored employment test comes from a validation study. Although the law does not strictly require that all tests be validated, it makes sense for employers to have evidence of the validity of all their selection procedures, but particularly scored ones. Rather than wait to be sued, employers should study the validity of tests before they're put into use and make sure that companies from which tests are purchased have done so as well. Second, although some tests may be appropriate for a broad range of jobs, evidence of validity usually applies to specific jobs or classes of jobs. An adequate validation study should proceed from a thorough job analysis in which the tasks of a job and the knowledge, skills, and abilities and other characteristics needed to perform the job are detailed. Employers should consider whether there are feasible alternatives to tests that have discriminatory effects, even if those tests are job related.